I leaned against the splintered remains of an oak tree, one that had likely been a sapling when the world was still green. My breath came in ragged plumes. The sun, or what was left of it after the wolf had its fill, was a pale, sickly bruise behind the soot-choked sky. The Frimbold winter had finally broken, but it hadn't left a world behind. It had left a graveyard. I looked down at my hands, calloused and stained, a man of the fields and the forge, reduced to a scavenger in the ruins of what was left after the gods' war. It had started with the water, the sea, which had boiled and churned with the thrashing of the world serpent, had only recently begun to go still. From the gray silt of the shoreline came a sound so small it shouldn't have mattered, the trickle of a thaw. Then, between two charred stones, a blade of leek green grass pushed through the ash, not the pale, sickly growth of a cave, but something vibrant, almost defiant, drinking deep from the rot of the old world. The stench of sulphur gave way to the sharp sweetness of crushed clover and damp earth. A warmth settled on the back of my neck, not the searing heat of Surtur's accursed flames, but something more golden and perhaps patient, like a loved one's hand coming to rest on my shoulder. I didn't move. I was afraid that if I turned it would be gone. Then out of the swirling smoke came the cats. Yes, cats. No different than the ones my mother had kept at her cottage when I was a child, except these were enormous, the size of large horses, their dark, flowing fur, long, somehow unsullied as if by magic, their paws leaving no print in the ash. Then the shimmer of gold, and the most impossibly beautiful gems I had ever gazed upon, at a throat of a pale marble, somehow catching the light from the sun that had barely managed to rise. Freyja walked through the ruins of Midgard as if she were crossing her own meadow, her cloak of hawk feathers trailing behind her, catching a wind that didn't exist. Where her hem brushed the ruined earth, incredibly yellow flowers opened, sudden, bright, and so beautiful, there were no words to describe it.
The cycle does not end,
She said. Her voice carried the low resonance of something older than language.
it only breathes.
Behind her, I see a huge mass of shadows shifting. At first I recoiled back in terror, an instinctual thing. But as I got a clearer look, I noticed that these were not the broken dead, or the mindless Draugr of the wastes. These were the ones she had claimed long before Odin could take his share, the warriors of Folkvagner, walking back into the world with purpose still in their eyes. Shield maidens with armor polished to a mere sheen, smiths with shoulders built for labor rather than war, carrying hammers and tongs instead of axes. Skalds moving through the ruins, their chants low and rhythmic, the sound seeming to settle the rubble, to remind the broken stones what it had felt like to hold together. The gods are dead, I rasped, my voice cracking from disuse. Freyja looked towards the horizon, where the new sun was finally pulling free from the gloom. When she smiled, I felt something happening in my chest. Not necessarily relief or joy, but the cautious, unfamiliar restart of hope. like a muscle remembering how to work after long disuse.
The gods are gone. But the Urder, the fate woven at the root of all things, is now in the hands of all of us. Together, we can forge ahead to a new future. A better future.
She turned from the horizon, looked at me then, fully, deliberately, the way you look at someone you had already decided to trust. She extended her hand towards me, impossibly unsullied, imperfect against the ruin of everything around us.
The world that was is ash and memory.
She said.
The world that comes will be built by those willing to build it.
Pause. The new sun caught the brisigament and threw light across the broken ground like something being born.
Will you join us, Leaf?
I stared at her hand, the impossible yellow flowers still blooming in the wake of her steps, bright against the black charred earth, bobbing cheerfully in the breeze. Entirely unreasonable, entirely alive. Slowly, I reached out. I'm Brandon.
And I'm Courtney, and welcome to the Time Travelers Club.
So last week you may have noticed that we had to deviate from the normal narrative. Well, to be completely honest, that's because some crazy life stuff happened to me over the last week. It was honestly pretty brutal. I experienced a lot of issues at work, got into an accident, and then said work decided to lay me off out of nowhere. So now I'm unemployed, so that's great. So with all that going on, we weren't. Yeah, it was like
It
two
just,
days.
it was, it was
Like,
bad. It was bad. It's just, it's like somebody stacked up the dominoes against you and just like flick, and all of them fell down, and we're just like, Brandon, no!
It's like, why? What is happening? Like, and yeah, I'm one of those people too, like where I always internalize it, figure out like what did I do wrong, you know, um, and like I really didn't.
No.
For once, like I hate to say it like that, but for once, I'm like I really in all this going on, like I'm like I didn't do anything wrong.
This was
But
not a you problem, but they made this a you problem.
Yeah, it was just like between this, like, this accident, which I won't go into too many details with. But there was that. It wasn't my fault, but here we are. And then now with this whole job thing, and again, I could be petty. I won't be, so I won't say like anything. But yeah, it was very unfair what had happened. And it was based off of circumstances outside of my control, despite what at first they tried to say. Which, and on the one hand, sometimes when bad things happen, I blame myself. But like on the other hand, like I'm also a pretty confident person. And so I'm like, and I know how to stand up for myself when the time really arises. And I'm like, no, these things that you're saying don't math. The math's not mathing. Try again.
All I can think is the Princess Bride. You keep using that word. I do not think it means what you think it means.
Yeah, and there finally kind of just came out that what they're willing to admit to, which is that this company decided to dump a lot of money towards one thing. And then they didn't get the traffic that they thought they were going to. So they decided to make some cuts. And part B was that because of some ethical things that they were doing that I thought were wrong, and I had spoken out about, not like in a disrespectful, unprofessional way ever, right? But like we had been in an environment where till that point, our opinions were not only asked for, it was expected that we give our opinions, right?
Mhm.
So based off of my professional opinions, based off of my experience, Courtney's experience, because she actually, her company, what my company was doing was something that her company had tried and failed at.
Mhm.
And they're like in the same vein, direct competition to each other. But like, yeah, and I'm like, it didn't work for them 3 months after they opened. Why would you think this would work a week after? But long story short, I think that because I was speaking out against some of these decisions, um, and not in a just a moany, gripey way, but one that actually made sense, they got nervous. They're like, well, if we have to make cuts, let's cut him.
Yeah. So,
So
yeah.
yeah, a lot happened.
A lot happened in a
And
very short amount of time. I hope you guys really did enjoy the Atlantis episode. We have
mhm,
the other parts of it on our Patreon. And we're brainstorming new things to put on there all the time. Obviously, it doesn't go with the main story arcs of what we're doing in the
yeah.
land of the free. But,
But like,
it's,
yeah, but a lot of the times there are sometimes it's like we're in the middle of a topic and we're like, oh, this is like we come across something in the research and we're like, this would be cool, but it really doesn't go with the story we're doing,
mhm,
like when we were talking about like ancient winemaking, right?
yeah.
Like when we were talking about Dionysus and stuff, I'm like, it doesn't really contribute to the main arc, but like when
And that
you're learning
season
about
was long
Dionysus,
enough
you're
already.
yes. So it's like, but that's why it's like we're gonna punt that way. But then there's other ones like the Hecate of it all that we started and put out, like which is gonna be part of a bigger kind of like mini series where we talk about like this idea of the triple goddess. Where does it even come from?
Hmm.
Some of it's myth busting, literally, by telling you the actual ancient myths. And things like that.
Yeah.
So we're kind of doing like this mini series about like these triple goddesses that kind of get conflated,
Hmm.
and some of them are they even triple goddesses, but like which was just out of pocket that didn't really have anything to do with anything we're talking about right now, but we are somehow kind of linking it. Like this time around, this season, we're gonna work on trying doing the Norns, right? Who are
Yes.
very much in the vein of what we're talking about. Especially since when we think of like the fates, if you've watched ye old Disney, which is Greek, I get that, but sometimes the Moray and the Norns kind of get like also weirdly conflated together.
Well,
But
yeah.
but like if you've ever watched Disney's Hercules, love OG one, probably the things that really imprinted on my love of myths and history as a child. Um, but yeah, no, like they're depicted quite like hags who wear robes and stuff like that. And a lot of times the Norns are also depicted that way. And when you read like Shakespeare's, like where they have like which we do a little cold open with Shakespeare at one point, but yeah, like those like witches, right, and Hecate, the triplet of it all, honestly remind me more of like how the Norns are like depicted at that point too. Um, versus like the goddess being triple, like where it's like,
Hmm.
young, you got matron crone. This is like just three old hags and like weaving the destiny of the people, in the story,
Well,
right?
yes. But
And
that, my
that's
dears,
only Norn
all
based.
of that is for Patreon.
Correct. So please, if in this time of need, no, but for real, like there's some good stuff there. We try to make it interesting. And I know Courtney's also working on a project where we go over the bloopers because if you think me in particular, the things that I say are unhinged,
Oh, it gets worse.
it's so bad. Uh, like
And so
nothing like
yeah,
where
I'm
it's like
probably gonna release the blooper reels on Patreon just because
they
what the
need to be
fuck?
behind a paywall for sure.
They
Also, you need
yeah,
to
they
know
might need to be.
context to like really get it. Um, But yeah, like it's not like I don't know. I like that. I would like to think it's not anything that's like canceled, like where I would get canceled. But like maybe I don't know. Sometimes I just say weird shit because of the ADHD of it all.
Intrusive thoughts.
Correct. Like baby eating things like that. Pizzagate.
Oh no.
You're right. So if you feel like we've got serious stuff, we've got fun, lighthearted stuff, then we've got outrageous stuff that we're going to be putting on there. Where we're dumpster fires. So if you're interested and you feel bad for me in any way, that would be a good time to take a listen.
Oh
And then
my
you might be like,
gosh.
oh, maybe that's why he got fired. Anyway, well, laid off. But
No.
so with
But
that being said,
with all of that being said, we probably do need a little bit of a recap from last time since it's been a couple of weeks now. So last time in Freyja Part 2, we went ahead and talked about some of the possible real-world origins to the mythology. Talked about the Proto-Indo-European cultures and how some of the myths, especially the ones involving the Vanir-Aesir War, were perhaps a sort of distant cultural memory of a real event. We also got into the Golvig of it all, and how she actually might just be Freyja under a different name, and how that really does change the narrative to a lot of the stories if she is. Golvig had been sent as sort of an ambassador to the Aesir, but Odin and his cronies had turned around and decided to torture and burn her 3 times in a row in order to punish her or learn her magical abilities. But like any good witch trial, they also decided to simultaneously accuse her of inspiring thoughts of greed in their own hearts rather than self-reflect. I'm sorry. All of this just makes me think of cover yourself up. Oh my god, the shoulders of it all. You're going
and
to
just
tempt men.
and I don't think it's any secret at this point, like what we're like, I've been telling anyone who'll listen, we're kind of doing like a part 1, part 2 of this series. Where part 1 we're talking about like ancient German witchcraft and magic and like clearly what we're doing. But then part 2 is like we go and fast forward to the 16th and 17th century.
Yeah.
Like about 1,000 years later. And how it's changed the views of women and magic, but also how it hasn't and how that's a problem. And you can kind of see it here. Things
Correct.
I cheated on this woman because this lady's a witch. She inspired lust into my heart. Again, rather than self-reflect, to be like, maybe I'm just a piece of shit.
Maybe I'm just thinking with my dick.
Right. And
but
let's kill this lady for it.
Exactly. But with Golvig, that didn't kill her, right? In fact, it made her even more powerful, and she would go on to teach her ways of magic to all people that she could get to listen to her. She would then make a stunning comeback after the war as Freyja and decide to live in the very halls where those men had tried to burn her and failed. Then we talked about Otar and how he was super cool and all about Freyja without any expectation of sexual favor or reciprocation. And she adored him for that because she appreciated a man who respects women and doesn't expect anything in return for that. So she decided to help him with a dispute he had with his friend about his lineage. And when we say help, we mean she turned him into her mythological golden pig, rode him into, a cave with a witch who could help them, gaslit said witch, and then she immediately saw through the ruse, and then eventually was threatened with violence when she tried to poison poor pig Otar. And for all of that, he got something called memory ale, which allowed him to remember all of the lineage going back as far as the beginning of time, and presumably he won his bet. So this week, we are going to pick up where we left off and discuss more mythology that involves our girl, Freyja.
All right, so this next story is primarily about the legendary king Halfr and his band of elite warriors. But the saga's opening act is a classic clash of gods, featuring a high stakes competition between Freyja and Odin. In this story, Freyja represents the fair and noble path of the domestic arts, which, ugh, I hate that, like, that last part, but, like,
Why
whatever.
domestic?
I don't know, but that's the way they described it. But,
Gross.
but like, we'll just say, I would like to just say fair and noble path. While Odin represents the deceptive, high-cost magic that ultimately leads to tragedy. I guess you could, if we were going to make like a fun like fantasy world depiction, it would be like she represents like practical magic, home witchery, things like that, and he represents like top tier magehood, where they're like, oh no, they've created like an abomination with blood magic because they were fucking around to find out,
Okay, so
just for the
it
sake
really
of fucking
has
around.
moral implications, and it is more
Yeah.
so like we're quite literally thinking the difference between a wise woman's hut and a mage tower where they're summoning demons.
Yeah, I mean, and it's not always demons, right? But like because you're doing these grand things, these experiments, like, and like experiments also kind of this negative connotation. I would say imagine I'm like more of a Merlin-y, bad, not the perfect one, but I guess, but more Merlin-y
Yeah.
wizard, right? He's not always summoning demons, but he's not just like typically he's not teaching people how to like make soup. Like
No.
he's not like here's a really cool spell that helps you like clean everything and make like the world a better place, or like honestly it reminds me a bit of Freyja. Like if you've ever watched the anime Freyja, it's about an elf lady. One of her favorite spells is a spell that makes a field of flowers bloom.
Mm-hmm.
Just for the joy, for the sake, it's like magic for the sake of magic, and for the sake of joy that it can bring, versus like most other mages, especially this other elf lady. They all have very German names too. She is like that's a useless, stupid spell, like verse, like, and it's like these, but then like these spells that they're more into are like the things that demons end up using and shit. So it's like,
Exactly.
it's like it could be used for great things, but it's also political and things like that, versus just like the soft, cozy journey of finding flowers, like so that she can make the flowers of her dead lover bloom for his statue, like beautiful, lovely. That's who we're dealing with, right? So it starts with a contest, right? And it begins with King Ulrich of Hordaland, that's a name, who finds himself in a marital crisis. He has 2 wives, okay?
Already a
Signy,
problem.
maybe. I'm not going to shame anyone who's poly, as long as everyone's consenting, right? We'll see. But we're going to see.
We'll see.
We'll see. But I feel like, these are some real king problems. You don't hear too many peasants having this problem.
Correct.
So you've got Signy, a princess, and Geirhild, the daughter of a commoner. Oh, okay. And they can't stop quarreling. Okay, so it seems like everyone's at least consensually in a relationship with him. Right? We'll see. But he's unable to maintain peace in his hall, and Ulrich declares a contest. He will keep only the wife who can brew the best batch of ale by the time he returns from his summer raiding. Well, that's shitty.
That's incredibly shitty.
That's one, maybe just honestly therapy. Some couple, well, I don't want to say couples, but like relationship counseling would be helpful. Mediation. What do I know? Maybe just pray to Freyja and be like, hey, I'm having these issues. It's literally her whole thing. But whatever.
It kind of is.
Well, the 2 women turn to the divine for help. Signy, princess, prays to Freyja, the goddess of fertility, beauty, and the domestic sphere. Seems like a logical choice. Probably something Ulrich should have done.
It seems like a choice. I also want to point out that The domestic sphere is not really what Freyja is over. That would be
No,
Frigg.
I know, Greg. This is where like we remember when we talked about sometimes these roles get blurred,
Yeah.
right?
The rules between Freyja and Frigg do get blurred. Um and this I
Because
think
like
is one of those
Leia
stories
can,
where they get
mhm,
conflated quite a bit.
correct, and I'm sure if we dug, like there might be a story where it was Frigg and Odin, wife versus husband too. Like you could see
Correct.
that story play out too. But the source I read said Freya, so I'm like, we're just gonna roll with it. Because she is fertility, she is beauty.
Hmm.
She's more love, and when I think of love, I think of like both the act of falling in love with a person, but also like that maintenance of love, the acts of love, right?
Yes.
Which also includes sex, but um, but other things, right? Versus Frigg represents matrimony or marriage, which is different, right? Those
Correct.
are it's more legal, but also you know when you think of marriage, it's not just about love, right? It's also
No, it's a
maintaining.
contract.
It's
Marriage
a
is a
contract,
contract. It is a business decision.
but so when you love someone, right? Even if it's not marriage, like in a contractual basis, where even common law, right, where it just kind of
Hmm.
happened, there is a degree of like learning to compromise, learning each other's faults, how to deal with that, and that has it
Hmm.
comes from a place of love, but that doesn't mean you love those things about that person. Like it's so I feel
Correct.
it's like the act of living with each other versus the act of loving each other,
Hmm.
right? And I think those are two different distinctions,
Correct.
right? Because there's plenty of people who live with each other, learn to live with each other, and you're like, fuck, they should have gotten a divorce years ago, like, but
Hmm.
they're comfortable, so that would be marriage, and I'm not saying marriage is bad, wrong, like, you do you, Glen Coco, but like, right. So anyway, that being said, Signy prays to Freya. Seems like at least a decent choice, right?
Hmm.
Whatever. And we know Freya's usually a girl's girl. And then Geirhild, the commoner, who I kind of feel bad for this because I was rooting for her the moment I saw, oh, she's not a one percenter, but whatever, encounters a mysterious stranger named Hot. Hmm.
Mm,
So much like that Big Daddy Zeus, Odin likes to do this thing too. If you watch the kind of terrible, but I still watched it, because sometimes you watch trash TV, Vikings, um, it's even in there. It's even in there. So yeah. Um Odin does this thing where he likes to dress up in disguise, and no one seems to know it's him except they kind of know it's him. So don't ask me why he's in disguise. Um but his name is Hot, and she's like, "Oh, Odin, hi." And he's like, "No, Hot. Okay, Hot." She begs for his assistance, right?
mm.
Hmm. So we are already seeing where Freya, you can just come right up to her. Odin, it's like, oh, already starting in a place of almost like trickery. Like you can't
Yes.
ask directly. Right.
Hmm.
Keep that in mind. So Freya's involvement is the pure side of magic. Like I said, the joy of magic, right? Like
Hmm.
magic in its raw form. Neither good nor evil, right? But like also like I would like to say it lean in this story at least, it leans more towards like practical magic, right?
Hmm.
So she answers Signy's prayers and like a mentor relationship, right? Guides Signy on how to brew an ale that is refined and worthy of a queen. Okay. In the Norse storytelling, Freya often acts as the patron of the rightful or noble side, supporting the established order, which is honestly interesting, right? Because you would think that would be Odin, right? Sky Daddy King. But it's
Yes
interesting
and
that
no.
Freya already. But it's just interesting in this culture, right?
Hmm.
That Freya always represents the good,
Hmm.
and yet she's like not like the main. It's just interesting, that your main character doesn't have that energy.
Correct.
Interesting, and yet like she's not played up more than, and we'll see that she in a lot of stories, even when she's not the main character, is a pillar of almost every story. right? And everything revolves around her, weirdly enough, even if she's not the main character. So that being said, Odin, as Hot, plays a darker game. He agrees to help Geirhild, but his magic is visceral and costly. To make her yeast more potent, which I hated that sentence for some reason. Here we go again. He spits into the vat. I feel like this is a euphemism, but whatever. He spits in the vat. I had no idea that all these Germanic gods were so obsessed with spitting into things, but it's like a pack of llamas here. I don't know.
Disgusting.
It's weird that it pops up in one story, but it's popped up in a couple of them now. He then demands a terrible price. Because of course he does. He wants whatever is between the vat and her. A classic mythological riddle. So, okay. Freyja's just like, cool, I'll help you. Let me teach you how. That way you just have this knowledge, right? Freely giving out that information, right? And then you've got Odin being the ivory tower of it all, which is like, let me do this for you. I'm not going to explain it. I'm not going to have you do it so that you know how to do it. No. I'll take care of it. And for that, because you don't know how, you owe me. So, when King Ulrich returns, because he hoards knowledge, by the way. Odin hoards the knowledge.
Yes.
And we talked about that in part 1. He's a knowledge hoarder. And that's why in part 2, he was torturing Freyja, who was Golvig, into that information because he doesn't know how to just ask. But then after Golvig turns into Freyja, she goes around, evangelizing like her magic, like literally telling anyone who'll listen how to do it. And so that's why, again, another hint that was Freyja the whole time. So when King Ulrich returns, he tastes both brews, which I hate that. While Signy's ale, blessed by Freyja, is excellent, Geirhild's ale, infused with Odin's divine essence.
I'm going to ignore that you said that.
It's what they say. That's what they said. God, if that's what his spit tastes like, imagine. Anyway, divine essence. So this brew is undeniably superior in strength and flavor. I bet it was. Had a little bit of a nutty flavor. So Ulrich chooses Geirhild as his sole queen, which good for her, I guess. A little rags to riches story. But of course, this victory is immediately soured. The king, probably because of whatever was in that brew, starting to gurgle its way back up. The king, who possesses a degree of foresight, realizes that the thing between the vat and Geirhild was her unborn child. Which, again, I feel like he's going to have a lot to say, but, he could have resolved the issues himself. But whatever, we're going to delegate that task and then blame that person when it goes wrong. This feels familiar. Very, very familiar.
Incredibly familiar.
But anyway, he utters a chilling verse. Gilherd, know this. This ale is good, but a dark shadow follows it. I see your son hanging on a high gallows, sold to Odin.
Oof.
Well, shit. So, the legacy of this deal, right? While Freyja's role in this specific saga is brief, it serves as a crucial thematic anchor. By backing Signy, Freyja offers a path to prosperity without the blood tax that Odin always requires. Literally blood magic. Anyway, Um, the son born of that Odin spiced ale.
Buh. Buh.
That boy was named Vikar, or Vikar, however you want to pronounce that. Vikar, who eventually became a great king, would ultimately indeed be sacrificed to Odin in a freak accidental quote, an accidental wink wink hanging, fulfilling the god's debt. Which, of course, very thematic, for Odin with the whole hanging of it all.
Mm-hmm.
But the idea that the knowledge cost was hanging oneself.
Yeah.
Right. The main hero of the saga, Halfir, is a descendant of this bloodline, a line defined by the tension between the martial glory of Odin and the refined, magical beauty represented by Freyja. And so why does this matter? For a historian, this story is a perfect example of how the Norse viewed their gods. Freyja is a goddess you pray to for a good year and a stable home, right? So domestic, yes, but also just like a good life. When you want peace and a happy life, and enjoy the beauty of this world, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's the person.
Correct.
And Odin is the god you pray to for a win. Even if that means destroying things, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so in doing so, he will eventually come to collect his debt in blood. So, and I would also argue, right, this is a good metaphor for sometimes it's okay to be ambitious. You don't have to settle for anything. But also know when life is good, man. Why why?
Exactly.
Why more? Why more? Because sometimes when you go, there's a point where you go too far, and it's then you start asking, was it worth it?
Absolutely.
Right? We see this throughout history. So even last season, stories where people could, if they had just been content with what they had,
mm-hmm.
they could have just lived good lives. But they wanted more for whatever reason. More power, more influence, more whatever.
This
and
is
they
the
didn't know
issue I
when
have with Odin to begin with. Overall, with my experiences as a practitioner. Whoa. If you find yourself in the magical sphere, if you find yourself trying to commune, just practitioner to practitioner for just a second, there is a point where you are asking for things to tip the scale so much that it is like throwing a boulder into a lake. It has massive ripples that you do not know how far it goes.
Mm-hmm.
Odin is that boulder, and he will cause those ripples. It will affect you for longer than you expect.
Well, even the environment, like the lake, pond, whatever, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you drop that boulder into a pond, that pond will never be the same. It could affect the entire ecosystem.
Exactly.
It can affect the flow of the water around it, and right. And I find it interesting too, because we're seeing a lot of these stories where Odin, it's there's a tax that must be paid, right, for his help, but also for his knowledge, but also in his own quest for a lot of this greater knowledge, he pays the ultimate blood tax.
He does.
The world ends because of it.
Exactly. And he is willing to allow it to happen. He is willing to allow it to happen, so he has the pursuit.
But it's the irony of it all, right? Mm-hmm. Because in all these stories, he's so desperate to stop it and of course, that's what's going to make it happen more, right?
Correct.
But and yet, when these, he go, "Ooh, I don't like this feeling. Maybe I shouldn't inflict that on other people." No. In fact, it's well, because I had to go through it, everyone else should feel that too.
Exactly.
And that also creates an environment where this is bound to happen.
Yep.
So it's interesting, like, and it's like there's this deeper lesson here, right? Which I find very interesting, especially when we're talking about the Germanic tribes, the Vikings of it all, where we get who are kind of notorious for going out a Viking, like, right? Never being content. But yet there's so many stories of like, people, because Viking is not Norse. Viking is a very specific group of people within a specific group of people.
Well, a
Right?
Viking is a job. That's a job
It's a
title.
job.
That has nothing to do with ethnicity or
Well, it's
anything like
also
that.
well, right, and like, but it gets we in modern, in particular, get that mixed up because the English just wrote like, oh, they call themselves Vikings,
Mm-hmm.
right? But like you said, it's technically it's an act, right? To go a Viking, right? But like it was also like a specific. It did evolve into like a specific like guard of like elite warriors within the raider community, right?
Yes,
Like, right. Not every raider was a Viking,
correct.
but every Viking was a raider. Um, but like, just like today, not everyone's in the military, right? And there were plenty of people who or would go Viking because they just wanted a better life where they could farm.
Yeah.
And then they would find land, put their axe down, and try to have a family and normal lives. Right? So, like, I do find it interesting, though, that in this very martial culture, right, there is this, like, you can go too far with it.
Yes.
Like, and that actually, deeply, all they want is a peaceful life that appreciates beauty. And I find that interesting, because that seems to get lost. So, that's just my little 2 cents on that. And ultimately, this saga effectively uses Freyja as the benchmark for what civilized victory looks like, right? Contrasted against the chaotic, predatory nature of the Viking era success that leaves a legacy to this day.
Correct. So for this next story and the one after it, we are about to get up to some real gender shenanigans. Again, proof that binary is not and has never been the only way.
Correct. Yeah. Like the idea that you have boy and girl, and boys wear boy stuff and girls wear girl stuff. Right? I mean, again,
Bullshit.
heels were originally designed for men.
Makeup was originally designed for men.
Right. Like if women were caught wearing that stuff, they were harlots. Yeah, and part of the reason women were considered whores were like, oh, they're taking acts of dominance, which makes them masculine, which is problematic. Right. Like, so like what is right? It's always been messy. Always. Even the color pink was originally a masculine color.
No,
like,
oh my God, I remember this article from the 1930s. It's the most ridiculous thing. Pink is the color for little boys because it's the color of blood being washed out of white clothes.
It's very, well, red in general was very masculine. Women who wore red, the scarlet letter, right? Like, pink is just a shade of red. Like, so, right. Blue was usually considered blue in general was considered a lot for just like kids, period. Like light blues in particular, right?
Powder blues, yeah.
Powder blues, but powder blue for a long time was a very feminine color, right? Like the Marie Antoinette, like think Rococo, right? And you'll see in a lot of Rococo paintings, like, I mean, you'll see them flip flop, but like a lot of men wore pink and a lot of women wore blue. Like, so like really that whole today that comes from like marketing.
Yes. It really does.
From like the 40s, 50s. And that made such an impression on people that they just instinctively now go like, oh, pink is for girls and women and feminine. Barbie versus blue, which is masculine.
Which is stupid.
But color is color. Period.
I like green.
I mean, so weirdly, I was thinking that, like, it's like, and that's why a lot of people go with green, because it's considered quote unquote gender neutral, but technically all colors are, you know,
Well,
like
yes.
who cares?
Exactly.
And it's a hard thing for us to overcome, even if you know that, but
I
because
know.
of the brain. But
Yay, societal
yeah, so
training. Ugh.
yeah.
So the story goes as follows. Thor wakes up one morning and his hammer is gone, which seems to happen way too often, especially when you're considering that he has the equivalent of a nuke that he just keeps misplacing. As you can imagine, this is already a catastrophe of the highest order. Mjolnir isn't just a weapon, it's the thing that stands between the gods and the giants, the great cosmic defense against chaos. Thor reaches for it and finds nothing. And the poem tells us that he shakes with rage, his beard bristling, groping around for what isn't there. It's actually slightly a comic image. The mightiest god in the Norse pantheon, red faced and patting his pockets. That is
I
funny.
mean, he was there just yesterday. I feel like this is also a euphemism, but I don't know. Maybe I
Indeed.
always think everything's a euphemism. Just
Well,
saying.
because a lot of the stories are a euphemism. So
Just groping
he.
around can't it.
Honey, where's the ketchup? Where it's always at. Look in the fridge. I can't find it. It's right there. No.
Oh,
Oh. My
did I
lived
lose you?
experience is so much fun. So he goes straight to Loki, which is interesting in itself. Not Odin, not the other gods. Loki. Because when something is wrong and weird and you need someone who can navigate the shadows, Loki is your man. Thor tells him that the hammer is gone, and Loki, characteristically, seems almost energized by the problem. And he runs straight to our homegirl and asks to borrow her falcon skin cloak, which allows the wearer to fly, and sets off to investigate. And because she is a cool chick, of course she says yes immediately. Say less. She'd lend it even if it were made of silver or gold, she says. It is a small moment, but a generous one. Freyja is established right away as someone with power and resources who deploys them willingly in the service of her community. The cloak itself is significant. It's hers, a marker of her agency in her particular kind of magic, shape-shifting, transformation, moving between worlds. These are Seether adjacent abilities, and they belong to her. Loki flies to Jotunheimer, the realm of the giants, and finds Thrym, a frost giant king, sitting on a hill, braiding his gold leashes for his dogs and trimming his horses' manes with every sign of smug satisfaction. Loki asks if he knows anything about a missing hammer. Thrym grins and says yes. He's buried it 8 leagues underground and he won't give it back unless he gets Freyja as his bride. Let's sit with that demand for a second because it is the engine of the whole poem. As we have already seen, Freyja is the most desirable being in the cosmos. This is stated repeatedly throughout Norse mythology. The giants are always trying to get their hands on her, and the gods are always refusing. She represents beauty, fertility, love, sexuality, and also a kind of sovereign feminine power that the giants covet, but can never legitimately possess.
Something else I'd like to throw in there too, right? Because like in this way, it's I think on the surface level, it's like, oh, damsel in distress kind esque, right?
Mm-hmm.
But when we talked about her last time, right? What if again this is political?
Mm-hmm.
She's there as a hostage, quote unquote, right? Which we talked in depth about.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not just like a political prisoner, right? Like that means you also have to keep her safe. In
Correct.
or else it all falls apart. Your alliance falls apart, right? Like you have to keep her safe. You can't just have her marrying anyone, right? There's like she's too politically hot, right? Like it
Mm-hmm.
has to be like whoever she's with can't take her away, but also can't be too powerful, but also can't be too low. You know, so like there's a lot of that going on, right? Which is also why she's allowed a lot of her own agency. But also when I say allowed, it's not like they were ever going to be able to do anything about it anyway. But, you know, with her kind of power, and they know that too. But yet it's also more than just that. She represents knowledge. Like whoever keeps her, like if you take her away, you could start a whole world war again. Maybe that's what you want. Or maybe you get all the allies and the knowledge that comes with her. It's why Golvik was tortured. So like there's a lot here, and it's not just that she's like, oh well, she's just so pretty, we can't let anyone hurt her. She's just so hot. It's like
She's
no.
just so hot.
It's like because if that's all it was, you're like, well, what do you mean it would be a disaster if someone had her? Because of who she is.
Correct.
She is not just a pretty face.
No, and Therm wanting Freyja is not just lust, it is a power grab. It is a giant reaching for something that belongs to the ordered world of the gods and trying to pull it into chaos. This is actually a recurring mythological pattern. In another story, a giant agrees to build the walls of Asgard and demands Freyja as payment. The gods panic, and Loki has to wriggle them out of it. Freyja is essentially used as a bargaining chip by the universe over and over, which is uncomfortable. But the poem is also aware of this, as we'll see. Loki flies back and delivers the news to Thor. They go together to tell Freyja, and they tell her to put on a bridal veil because she's going to marry Therm. Freyja's response is magnificent. She is so furious that the hall shakes. Literally, the poem says that the gods' hall trembles. Her necklace, the famous Brisingamen, bursts from her neck, and she delivers what amounts to a blistering refusal, calling the whole idea a disgrace and saying that she would seem the most desperate of women if she ran off to Jotunheimer to marry a giant. That moment matters enormously and doesn't always get the attention it deserves. Freyja is not consulted. She is informed. Two male gods show up and tell her that she's going to do it with her body and her life, and she says, absolutely not, with enough force to shake the building. Her anger is not portrayed as hysterical or unreasonable. It is presented as righteous. The poem validates her refusal completely.
Yeah, and if you think back to like the Greek of it all, right? Like how many stories did we have like that?
Mm-hmm.
I'll wait. There's not. In the few instances where you see a woman who doesn't just like Disney princess style throw herself onto the edge of her bed and cry into it, and it, like you get like say like Hera who goes absolutely the fuck not. She gets strapped to a fucking chair and tortured.
Exactly.
You know, like until she submits. Like no one's trying that bullshit here. They're like, okay, sorry. You know, like, like she's not one to fuck around. It's like it's almost like they forget. This also points to like this real world idea, like maybe these or like European people, right, would forget why they made a peace with the Danube like civilization. It's like, oh right, we didn't conquer them. We came to an agreement, and that's why. Correct. We forgot that they can be real scary.
Mm-hmm. And then in a move that is either pragmatic genius or a spectacular failing of the gods, depending on how you read it, they simply don't make her go. They find another solution, which means Freyja's refusal actually works. She exercises agency and is respected. For a mythological transition that often treats her as a prize to be won or traded, this is notable. The gods call a council, a thing, a formal assembly, to figure out what to do. It's Heimdall who comes up with a plan, and it is deeply undignified. Dress Thor as the bride, which he deserves, okay? He deserves it for losing his fucking hammer.
Right. Why are we making it's like, oh hey, my bro here lost his nuke again. So you have to pay the price for that? She's like, fuck you, I will. He got himself
No,
into it. How about he get himself out? How about that?
I think the fuck
Like,
not.
mm-hmm.
So, put him in a dress and a veil. Hang Bersingamen around his neck, Freyja's great necklace, which is important. Tuck keys at his belt the way a Norse woman would wear them. Pad him out with jewelry. And send him to Jotunheimer as the fake Freyja. And Loki will go along dressed as a handmaid.
So I have thoughts about this plan. Okay. So, like, I'm just going to put this out there, right? If you're thinking of Chris Hemsworth, you're wrong. Thor is usually, at best, depicted as a very burly, bearded ginger, but he's also usually quite portly.
Mm-hmm.
Like, he got a beer gut, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
just think of the biggest, burliest, beer-gutted man in your life, okay?
No, he's built
And
like a barrel. He's not built like a tortilla chip. He's built like a barrel. He's
well,
a
he's not even
big
like,
burly
oh,
bear of a
okay,
man.
it's like just the proportions of him, right? And it's not like,
Yeah.
oh, well, he's just like a very pretty man. No, like he just think of what Freya looks like, and it's like
Mm-hmm.
the opposite. And I just think, yeah, this is gonna work. This is fine, of course, you know. And
Mm-hmm.
he's very, um, Courtney. I'm pretty sure he's gonna take this well because he's known for being so reasonable, right?
Oh, totally. So Thor's reaction is immediate and very on brand. He absolutely refuses. He says the gods will call him Arger. There's that word again. If he wears a bridal dress. He is genuinely more concerned about his masculine reputation than about getting his hammer back.
God, this sounds so like contemporary. It's almost like
Yeah.
people in the real world, like politicians, are more worried about like what they'll look like or egos than actually doing the right thing. Even if that
There
means other
you go.
people die at their expense.
Exactly.
Hmm.
Loki and the other gods talk him down by pointing out that without Mjolnir, the giants will take Asgard. The hammer is too important. Thor, grumbling, puts on the dress.
Yes.
Now, pause here because this is rich. This is rich with meaning. Thor in a dress, wearing Freyja's necklace, taking her place, is played for comedy and it is funny, but there is something deeper going on. Freyja's identity is being literally put on by someone else. Her most sacred possession, Brisingamen, is draped around Thor's neck as a costume piece. The femininity and sexuality that define her in the god's world are being worn as a disguise, a trick, a tool. And yet the disguise works because Freyja is so powerful and so desirable that even a giant can believe that this is her. Her reputation is so enormous that it creates the illusion. In a strange way, it's the gods borrowing her power to solve a problem, which is not entirely different from what Therm was trying to do by demanding her in the first place. The keys at Thor's belt are worth a mention too. In Norse society, a woman's keys were a symbol of her authority over the household. She controlled the storerooms, the resources, the domestic domain. It wasn't a trivial symbol. Putting those keys on Thor is dressing him not just as a woman, but as a woman of status and power. They arrive in Jotunheim with Therm. They arrive in Jotunheim, and Therm is beside himself with excitement. He orders a feast, and Thor proceeds to eat an entire ox, 8 salmon, and all the delicacies set aside for the women, washing it down with 3 barrels of mead.
Might be why he has a larger corporate, a larger figure.
Potentially. Therm,
Because, man,
yeah.
I was gonna say
Ooh.
these are the man. These are the guys I'm attracted to. Anyway, like her. Like, how are you
Grr.
doing?
Hi. Keep me warm in the winter. But Therm is a little alarmed. He has never seen a bride eat like that. Loki, playing the handmaid.
And I firmly believe Loki was hot. Loki was like, they absolutely were like, I go between genders all the time. I got you. The Chevalier d'Eon of it all. Like it's like
Absolutely.
one of those like those animes where you have that really pretty guy, like the pretty boy, and then like they're like, oh, he's so pretty. Let's put him in a dress. Then he's like the hottest lady there, and it's like, yeah, this is a very I
This
like
is that.
that's my head. This is my head canon.
Absolutely. But Loki smoothly explains that the bride was so excited about the wedding that she hasn't eaten in 8 days. Therm, who is not the sharpest frost giant in Jotunheim, finds this completely satisfying. This guy's dumb. So when Therm... He dumb. When he leans over to kiss his bride and recoils from Thor's eyes, burning fierce and terrifying, Loki explains that she hasn't slept in 8 days either. She was so eager to get here. Therm accepts this too.
You know what? No, Therm is not a dum-dum. He just is respectful of women. He's like, you know what? I get
Respectful of women. No, he is not. Don't you dare.
No, he's not. That's true. I mean, he did literally just like
exactly.
But he could have forced himself, but he didn't. He's like, oh, okay, like, all right, I'm not gonna shame her for eating a lot. Like, she's hungry. Like, whatever. Okay, she may be fine. She's tired. I get it. You know?
Yeah.
Thor could do worse. I'm just saying.
So the comedy is broad, and it's meant to be, but it's doing something interesting. The disguise is paper thin, and it only works because Therm wants to believe. He wants Freyja so badly that he's willing to overlook the fact that his bride is clearly enormous and eats like a starving bear. Desire makes fools of people, even giant kings. There's a certain irony in the fact that his obsession with Freyja is exactly what makes him unable to see that she isn't there. Therm's sister shows up asking for bridal gifts. Gold rings, Freyja's favor. She's reaching for the same thing Therm is, just more transactionally. The whole giant family is trying to grab a piece of what Freyja represents. Then Therm calls for Mjolnir to be brought out and placed in the bride's lap, as was apparently a Norse wedding custom. The hammer would be laid on the bride's knees to consecrate the marriage and invoke fertility. Because, let's be completely honest here, Thor is a fertility god.
Well, the euphemism's right there.
The euphemism is right there, but Thor is a fertility god. Thor's hammer is what swings between his legs.
Correct. And that's the euphemism right there, folks. Correct. We're going to lay your meat hammer in her lap.
Ta-da.
Ta-da.
It is a deeply ironic moment. He's handing back the weapon that will kill him as part of the ritual meant to bind Freyja to him forever. The moment Mjolnir touches Thor's hands, the disguise is over. Thor grabs it, rips off the veil, and starts killing giants. He kills Therm first, and then his sister, then apparently every other giant at the wedding feast. The poem ends abruptly and triumphantly. Thor has his hammer back.
His manhood back.
His
right?
manhood.
Correct. So, I just want to take a minute to visualize that. Either Thor all of a sudden just like grabs his hammer and just, flexes and it like shreds from his body. Or, he is beating people's ass in the equivalent of a prom dress.
It wouldn't even be a prom dress realistically.
Well, I know.
For the comedy of it all, yes. But would it be nicer clothes? Yes.
No, well, I'm thinking for the comedy of it all, I didn't mean prom dress. You know those like it's been trendy the last couple years, especially weirdly enough for people who are like heavily pregnant and like getting a shotgun wedding, where they wear those like itty bitty dresses. like the short
Yeah,
ones.
that doesn't. Yeah, no.
And because he's so big, that's just all I'm thinking of. Is that's how Freyja's clothes fit him. And he's been barely able to keep them on this whole time because they're like, so either he flexed and it's just like, man nipples hanging out, or like he just literally is like in this dress, beer gut in this dress, cocktail looking dress, beating people's ass. Either way, it's hilarious. And not because
Yeah.
people wearing dresses is hilarious. It's just the situation of like this hyper masculinity and trying to prove how hyper masculine he is with his hammer. He's finally got his hard on. I mean, hammer back.
Oh, he
And he's
got
doing
some Viagra. Yay, Thor! He got his Viagra.
trying to prove his masculinity. All right. So, what does this all mean? What does this whole crazy story mean? Right. On the surface, this is a rollicking adventure story with just some great comic energy. But pull back the veil. Ah, ah. Anyway, pull that back a little bit, and the symbolic architecture is so. Like we were kind of saying earlier, Freya sits at the center of the whole story without ever leaving Asgard. The theft of the hammer and its recovery hinge entirely on her desirability, her possessions, her identity, her refusal. Mjolnir is recovered not through Thor's strength, but through Freya's power of being borrowed and deployed. But also, like, what, honestly, these guys came up with this wackadoodle problem and then solution. And she's like, fine, I'm going to make it work. Whatever.
Pretty much.
As long as y'all aren't going to marry me off, because you won't, I'll help you figure it out however you want to figure it out. So her cloak helps find the hammer. Her necklace sells the disguise. Her reputation makes the whole thing work. She is, in a real sense, the instrument of the god's salvation, and she never goes anywhere. Her refusal is also quite radical in context. The poem represents a world where Freyja is constantly coveted, threatened, used as a bargaining chip almost automatically, and she simply says no.
Like I'm thinking
No.
like oh my god.
The
Looney
meme with
Tunes
Bugs Bunny.
style, Bugs Bunny style. No.
Yes, that's like her response. Also, we get to see for a moment she's terrifying. Like Thor, to get that same level of like, okay, calm down, Thor. He has to literally like thrash and beat shit and lose, like, break stuff. She just goes, no, and the whole, absolutely not, and the whole room shakes and everyone's okay.
We're not gonna do that.
Like, she doesn't have to break things because
No.
they go, oh yeah, we remember what happened last time.
Indeed.
We can't do shit. So, and she doesn't need to fight or trick her way out of it. Her anger alone is enough to close the door on that matter.
Mm-hmm.
So then there's the cross-dressing at the heart of the poem. This is interesting too. Thor's temporarily inhabiting Freyja's identity, wearing her necklace, her role, the symbols of her womanhood and power, and using that to defeat chaos could be read several different ways. It might read as the masculine order needing to incorporate or at least borrow from the feminine to survive. It might also read more critically as gods casually colonizing Freyja's identity because they can, because she's useful. And both readings feel true simultaneously, right?
Yeah.
And Brisingamen, her necklace, deserves its own moment. It's her most sacred object, deeply tied to her identity, her sexuality. And we talked about the necklace before, right? And I remember us kind of half jokingly saying, like, it was magic. And they're like, but what does it do? And be like, don't worry about it. Really, don't worry about it. That's her magic, right? The magic was that it was beautiful. Magically beautiful. That's it. It doesn't need to do anything else. Magic for the sake of magic. Beauty for the sake of beauty. And just appreciating it. That's it. It doesn't need to, like, make you invisible or, light shit on fire. Like, it needs to exist. That's it. And that's beautiful that it exists. Right?
Correct.
And that seeing it inspires hope. So other myths tell murky stories about what she did to acquire it. We're not touching that one again.
No, not touching that one again.
But that being said, it does carry enormous personal significance. Watching it used as a prop in someone else's con is a little uncomfortable, even when the con is supposed to be funny.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it almost makes fun of the beauty of it for the sake of beauty. The giants throughout represent chaos reaching for order, specifically a masculine chaos, reaching for feminine generative power. Thrun wants Freyja the way entropy wants to consume life, and the gods defeat this not with straightforward force, but with disguise, trickery, and the strategic deployment of exactly the feminine power Thrym was trying to steal. It's a story that knows it's funny, but underneath the comedy, there's a genuine tension about who gets to use Freyja's power, who gets to make decisions about it, and what it means that even among the gods, she is perpetually desired, perpetually threatened, and perpetually having to find ways to remain her own person in the middle of it all. Her two moments in the poem, lending the cloak freely and refusing the marriage furiously, are small, but they're hers. In a moment, in a story that is largely about her, without being about her, those moments are everything.
They really are. And it's like we were talking earlier before we started recording, everything feels like Freyja is like the center post and these stories are happening around her. Like she is
Mm-hmm.
so central to this universe. But and it's like they can always see her, but they don't acknowledge that they can always see her.
Which is crazy too, because you have to remember this is all being like passed down to us in fragments through
Mm-hmm.
like Christian monks.
Correct.
So and there's that misogynistic filter happening. So if this is what's getting past that, what else
Imagine what the other
was
stories were. Yeah. So we are shifting gears. We got another story going on. The story of Schleipnir's birth is often told as a Loki story, but it is arguably the most terrifying moment in Freyja's life. In this narrative, she isn't just a goddess of love. She is the high stakes collateral in a cosmic gamble that nearly cost the gods the light of the world.
again?
Again. The walls of Asgard had been shattered during the war with the Vanir. The gods were vulnerable and their home was open to the elements and the giants. Out of the mountain's mists stepped a nameless master builder who offered to rebuild the fortifications in just 3 seasons, a feat that should have been impossible. He didn't want gold or land. He demanded 3 things: the sun, the moon, and Freyja. Not much, right? Seems fair and totally reasonable.
Yeah, that's what I always ask for payment. Maybe that's why I
Absolutely.
got laid off.
Maybe. I don't know. They couldn't afford the sun or the moon, much less Freyja.
Damn.
Damn.
Yeah.
The Aesir were hesitant, but Loki, ever the problem solver, convinced them to accept. Loki argued that no one could build a wall that fast. They would all get a half of a wall for free and keep the girl. Everyone agreed, but the builder added one condition. He must be able to use his stallion, Svaldafari. To the gods, this was a game of logistics. Oh, did we say that everyone had agreed? Well, there was one really, really important person missing from those negotiations. Of course, they had never thought to ask the woman whose life they were bartering that, maybe if she had any opinions on it.
Yeah, that'd be crazy.
I know, crazy. So
They
obviously to
already
Freyja.
forgot. They already forgot what happens when she get mad.
Exactly. So, obviously, for Freyja, this was a nightmare situation. And it would seem that they didn't learn from the last time that they did this, but that's dudes for you. As the winter progressed, the builder worked with a terrifying supernatural speed. Because, of course, his equine companion, Svaldvari, wasn't just any horse, he was a force of nature, hauling massive stones that 10 men could not even move. Freyja watched from the high towers as the walls rose higher every day. In the mythology, her distress is visceral. She is described as sitting in her hall, weeping and fearful, as the prize of a giant. But based off of all the other stories that we have come to know so far, we'd like to think that she wasn't just sitting there crying, "Woe is me." Rather, she's just glaring at these idiot men like, well, I'm waiting for the brilliant idea to get me out of this since you guys were so confident that it wouldn't be a problem.
Right. Because the story does in kind of make her like, oh, Disney princess crying into the bed. It just seems very out of character for her.
Very, very out of character.
I'm like, so I could see, sure, she might be weeping tears of rage. Like, you idiots again. Like I could see that, but like this is the Christian lens of it all. Like when they're doing these retellings, like,
Indeed.
oh, like she can't be mad. She's just gotta be like, oh, and they feel so bad for her that they'll help her.
Exactly. That's dumb. She is
Yeah.
anything but a damsel in distress.
Mm-hmm.
And for the record, for her, this wasn't just about marriage. It was about the literal darkening of the world. If the builder won, the sun and moon would leave the sky, and the Lady of the Vanir would be dragged into the cold, dark realm of the Jotun. Because she's like, yeah, what were you thinking? It's bad enough that you think you can prop me up as a prize all the time, but y'all really did the whole thing with the sun and the moon? Like, they're idiots. They're morons.
Yeah. Well, and the thing is too, like they're building these walls, right? And it's like, okay, well, they're trying to keep the giants out, right? Well, this giant is helping them build it.
Correct.
So that can be it. So what are they
Indeed.
building these walls for? Right?
Exactly.
And like they don't really specify. They kind of imply, oh, it's to keep the giants out. Uh-huh. And yet you're employing a giant? Like
Of
who
course.
clearly has some kind of important role? Like he wouldn't just tell his brethren how he built the walls or installed a weakness in them in case his brethren ever want to, So like to me this screams like, oh, they lost that war. Well, came to a stalemate and they're maybe trying to prep for that again.
Potentially.
And
So,
yeah.
yeah. 3 days before the deadline, only the gateway remained unbuilt. The sun was still in the sky, and Freyja was still in Asgard. But the gods realized that they were about to lose everything. And then they did what the gods always did when things went wrong. They turned to Loki because they have to have their controlled chaos. Loki is the controlled chaos. Which, it's kind of weird that they keep turning to the two people who are the most anti-masculine warrior types in their group to solve all of their problems.
Mm-hmm.
But of course, instead of valuing this asset on their team, they instead threatened Loki with a slow, painful death if they didn't find a way to sabotage the builder. Because the bigotry of it all. Loki, realizing their life and the light of the world depended on it, hatched a plan that only they would be willing to execute. Which, to be fair, they should do because they are the one who got everyone into this mess, but no one else, was exactly coming up with any ideas. It's like asking the whole room if they have any ideas, and then one person answers and they go for it just so that if something goes wrong, they can blame that person. And Freyja was never in the room to give her opinion because if she had, I'm sure it would have been a good solution.
And probably wouldn't involve the sun and the moon
Correct.
and her body.
Correct. That night, as the builder led Svaldvari out to haul the final stones, a beautiful, shimmering mare emerged from the woods. She whinnied, she pranced, and caught the stallion's eye. Svaldvari, driven by instinct, snapped his reins and chased the mare deep into the deep forest. The builder spent the entire night trying to catch his horse, but the mare was too fast and too clever. And by the time the sun rose, the deadline had passed. The wall was unfinished, and the builder flew into a giant's rage, revealing his true identity as a mountain giant. Thor, who had been away hammering giants, arrived just in time to settle the bill with Mjolnir. Freyja was safe. The sun remained in the sky. The moon continued its cycle. But Loki was missing for months. And when they finally returned to Asgard, they weren't alone. They were leading a strange, gray, 8-legged colt. That's right! That super sexy mare was, in fact, Loki themselves. And yes, I feel like at this point we can use different pronouns for the person who just turned into a lady horse and gave birth to an 8-legged immortal horse that can talk. Like, at this point, we can agree that they are at least non-binary.
Yeah, like, I mean, they also were a handmaiden in the last tale.
Yeah.
And no qualms with it. Like, they didn't, like, they're like, bet, no hesitation. Like, yeah, I'm the handmaiden. Yeah. And then
Indeed.
I'm also the hot one. Don't worry about it.
So this cute little horse with as many legs as a spider was Sleipnir, the offspring of Svaldvari and Loki in their male form, in their mare form. And for a kind of messed up plot twist, Loki presented the horse, who we have to remember was in fact the child they had just birthed, to Odin as a gift. Perhaps as a way to distract everyone from the extremely awkward circumstances of the horse's conception.
I mean, this is taking Brony to a whole new level, right?
That is terrible.
But I mean, Brony implying masculine here. But I'm like, it's just like I don't have a good one for a non-binary one. So like, but it's giving that energy. Like it's like horseplay taken to all new extremes. Yeah.
Did you have to? Oh no.
Are you still there?
Yeah. I'm still here.
You are. Okay. She's just dying. Don't worry about it. I was like, okay, let's go.
No, you didn't lose me. Just, Jesus, I was not prepared for the, like, for
Pink Pony Club. Member 1 Loki.
Yes.
Also, the idea of like a horse with like legs, like to me feels more like Nightmare Fuel, but whatever. Too many legs. But anyway, so let's look at this from an art historical perspective, right? Interestingly, this story is one of the most frequently depicted in early Norse art. On the Ardé image stones in Gotland, not Scotland, Gotland, you can see depictions of the 8-legged horse and the walls of Asgard. For an art historian, the story of Sleipnir's birth is a masterclass in liminality. Loki crosses the line between male and female, between God and animal. Sleipnir crosses the line between the world of the living and the world of the dead. as he is the only horse that can carry Odin to hell. And Freyja stands at the center yet again as the fixed point, the represent of civilization and the light that the wild giants try to consume. While the story is often played for laughs because, you know, so silly that he became a horse, and it is, to be fair, the visuals are fucked up. Like, okay, I'm not gonna lie, like, yay of it all, right? And it's just like, and you've got this big, strong horse just plowing Loki in the woods, I guess, somewhere. There's a lot to unpack there for sure.
Mhm.
It could, and I think all we could do is laugh, but um, it's honestly also kind of unfortunate from Freya's perspective. The birth of Sleipnir was the payment for her freedom. And correct me if I'm wrong. I'm pretty sure Sleipnir is often depicted as sentient, right?
Mhm.
So this is not like, oh, it's just an animal. Which I don't know how to unpack that either. And just like the idea of like some humanoid giving birth to an animal, right? Like to your pet, that's also weird. But if it's not, then the alternative is that this is a sentient being and you sold your baby into slavery.
Correct. And that's the part that I'm just like, Loki, why?
And like this is actually again like a nod towards some of these cultures, which they would sometimes do. If
Mhm.
you were in debt or trying to get out of a bind, sometimes you sold your children. This is a brutal world, unfortunately. A brutal time,
Mhm.
and it's not all lovely huts and herbs and strolling through the forest.
No, very much
Sometimes
not.
sometimes you're a horse and you get plowed by another horse, and then you give birth to an eight-legged horse, and then you sell that child that's also sentient, and you sell that child into slavery.
That is just a series of unfortunate events.
That's a sentence I didn't think I would ever say.
I wish you didn't
So,
have to.
but now it's in everyone's minds. So, let's move on from that horrible thought. Um, so this next story also involves Loki. And it's a story literally called the Loka Senna, right? And in this story, it would seem that they are just about tired of being the literal, this redhead stepchild of it all. Totally can relate.
Indeed.
I get it. I get it, Loki. I get it. In fact, the trouble starts before Loki even opens their mouth. Aegir, the great god of the sea, has thrown a feast for the gods. A lavish, glittering affair in his hall beneath the waves. That seems lovely. It's
It does.
giving like Little Mermaid vibes.
A little bit.
Like, yeah. I'm imagining the opening scene. The mead flows, the gods are in good spirits, and Aegir's servants, Firmafen and Eldir, are receiving compliments from all sides about how well they're managing the whole thing. This apparently irritates Loki beyond endurance, and in a fit of pique, he kills Firmathan outright. Right there.
Why?
I don't know. I don't even know why Loki's mad. It's just mad. Hmm. Anyway, like there was nothing about it that said like, oh well, Loki helped, and they weren't getting like appreciated or anything, or like, oh, they were just jealous. It's just like they were annoyed, and then they killed Finnegan.
That's rude. Loki, that's rude.
So the gods, understandably this time, were horrified and drive them out into the woods. Which I'm like, oh, last time they went into the woods, they got pregnant. Don't do that. Anyway, so, but Loki doesn't stay gone. They come back. Loki finds Eldir outside the hall and asks what the gods are talking about in there. I would be real nervous of Eldir at this point. But Eldir
Mm-hmm.
tells them the gods are talking about weapons and warfare, and that nobody inside has a good word to say about Loki. Loki shrugs this off and announces they are going in anyway to mix the mead with malice. Eldir warns them that if they go in throwing insults, they'll throw them right back, and Loki essentially says, good. My thought on this is though maybe the reason Loki's pissed, right, and it's just not said, right,
Mm-hmm.
is think about all these stories we've talked so far this episode where Loki bails everyone out and no
Mm-hmm.
one appreciates them.
Yeah.
Yet these people throw a little dinner party and they get all the praises on earth. That doesn't mean you go killing people. Bad, Loki,
No.
bad.
Very bad,
But
Loki.
But Loki literally took horse dick for all of you and got knocked up.
Loki took horse stick for you.
Like, where's their parade?
Oh
And
my god.
we always talk shit about Loki, including probably the horse dick. But like, Loki's like, y'all aren't squeaky clean either, and that's where we're going in.
That's what
Welcome
she
for
said.
that.
That's what she said.
That's what they said. Anyway, so inside the hall, the whole place goes silent when Loki walks in. There's that awful moment where everyone sees them and nobody speaks. Then Loki invokes an ancient oath they and Odin once swore that neither would drink unless the other was served too. It's a clever move. Hospitality and oath keeping were sacred obligations in Norse and Germanic cultures, and they are essentially daring Odin to violate both at once by turning them away. Odin, cornered, tells his son Vidar, which I wonder if this is the same Vidar from earlier in the story. Isn't that interesting?
Mm-hmm.
Like, yeah, the one who got hung. But that wasn't his son, supposedly. I don't know.
No.
And maybe different Vidar? Like, is that like their
Well,
equivalent of Joe?
I don't know, because
Like,
the one that we were looking at earlier was Vikar.
oh,
Vidar.
there we go. There we go. Gotcha. It's a Joe Joseph situation. I got it. All right. So, um, so Vidar is told to stand up and give Loki a seat, and just like that, Loki is in the room with a drink in their hand. Loki raises a toast and immediately uses it to exclude Odin's wife Frigg. It's the first shot fired, and from here, the poem becomes this extraordinary, almost theatrical procession of confrontations. We got some dirty laundry, some shade to throw. So,
Oh.
the library is open. So, Frigg is accused of sleeping with Odin's brothers Vili and Ve while Odin was away. Freyja tries to intervene and tell Loki they are mad, and Loki wheels on her with a ferocity that feels almost personal, which is sad because, like, Freyja was like his hag. Like,
Yeah.
don't turn on your hag, you're girly. That's unfortunate. But that also tells, like, how fed up Loki's mental state has gotten.
Yeah.
Right? Loki is real tired of this shit. And unfortunately, they are lashing out at everyone. So they accuse her of having taken every god and elf in the room as their lover, including her own brother Freyr. Remember, her dad was accused, like, that her mom is actually her aunt, right?
Mhm.
When the gods caught her doing it, they say, she farted in fright.
You see, that just comes across as slander instead of something that's
That's
true to me.
to be fair, we've all done it, okay? We've all been in the moment, and we had a little, and it's fine. It's fine.
No,
But like,
everyone farts during the deed, and if you're with a partner that makes you feel bad for that, you're with the wrong partner.
but the point was that you don't now go around talking about it, and but it's definitely felt like it's just like the punctuation of it all. Like, not only did you sleep with your brother, like you're from Alabama. Sorry to any listeners in Alabama. I hope your family relations are close and lovely. Um, and but it's like not only are you a brother fucker, you are also farting. Um, just to really dehumanize it
So
all, I guess.
silly. It's so silly.
It's so silly, but it's crude, deliberately humiliating, and it speaks to something real about Freya's mythological position. She was the goddess of love and desire, the mistress of satyr magic, extraordinarily powerful, and yet in a culture that simultaneously celebrated and policed female sexuality. All that made her a target. Loki's attack isn't random. They are going straight for the thing that makes her transgressive. Her husband Oder is long gone because, she always forgets where he goes every year. And she weeps golden tears for him. She's already a figure of exposed vulnerability, and Loki just presses right on that bruise.
Which is fucked
Um,
up.
yeah. Also, like, goddess of desire and sexuality and power. Uh, not very inspiring. Like,
Oh dear.
it's definitely right. But that's like, oh, you think you're cool? Right. And instantly that image shatters that picture, right? Freya's brother Freyr had actually given away his magic sword to win the giantess Greater as his wife. So now Loki mocks him for it later, and it lands because it's true. And because that sword, it's said, will be sorely missed at Ragnarok. Even in insults, there are shadows of what's coming and truth, right? It's like,
Mhm.
okay, so that was true. Is the thing they said about Freya true? We don't know, right? It's
Mhm.
like, is it just shade,
Yeah.
right? And that's enough. It's the rumor. The gods keep trying to shut Loki down. Tyr steps up to defend Freyr's honor, not Freyr's, because I guess fuck Freya. And Loki reminds everyone that Tyr lost his hand specifically. It was bitten off by the great wolf Fenrir, who is Loki's own son, because the animal births of it all. Loki, but I mean, to be like just a little side note of that, that's also showing that Loki, who is not the masculine traditional warrior type, has these non traditional relations, shall we say? Of course. Um
Ugh.
that the but like that these acts are monstrous,
Yes.
right? They could have just as easily had Loki sleep with the giant,
Mhm.
distract the giant for a night. No, Loki fucked the horse
Correct.
and had an animal baby because of it. It's on purpose. So, just a little note there. And that all these children, with the exception of Sleipnir for some reason, the snake, the wolves, the the lady who's half skeleton, um, all these monstrous beings are going to be the these like heralds to the end of the world.
Mhm.
So, right. They also add that Tyr's wife slept with them, Loki, and then had a son by them. So then we're seeing that moment too, that Loki, when Loki is assuming a masculine role, It's totally fine that their child is the product of an affair and lies. That's fine. You can have a normal child, son, even by them. That. But, Um so Tyr has no real comeback to this though. Then one of the poem's most explosive moments. Odin tries to shut things down, and Loki turns on him directly. They accuse Odin of practicing Seder.
Ooh.
So, yeah. This needs a moment to land properly. Seder, as we've discussed, was the great magic of prophecy, fate manipulation, and it was pretty exclusively Freyja's domain. She was its mistress, and according to some sources, she taught it to Odin. But Seder carried a deep cultural stigma for men. Practicing it was thought to be inherently feminizing, putting the practitioner in a passive, receptive position, bottom, that Norse culture considered shameful for a man. This comes from the pie of it all, because you see this with the Greeks and the Romans, like it's cool if you're a top, not cool if you're a bottom.
Correct.
And that includes heterosexual relationships. If your woman mounts you or you gave her oral, you were in fact now a woman and she was penetrating you. So, yeah. No acts of service here for your lady. This word, so the word for the shameful, quote, unmanliness was ergi or arger. And it wasn't just an insult. In Norse law, actual Norse law, calling a man an arger, not augur, like arger, was one of the gravest things you could say, and he was legally entitled to kill you for it. So Loki is essentially calling Odin, the All-Father, King of the Gods, a pervert and a coward and less than a man, all in one word, or a faggot.
Ooh. That hits hard.
It hits hard, right?
Yeah.
Right. So, and it's not entirely like a pundit, but like that impact.
Yeah.
It's still pretty close, right? Like, I mean, I guess you're not legally allowed to kill someone for calling you a faggot, but like, it's there, right?
Correct.
People who have been accused of it, right, have gone out of their way to kill people for that, or to prove their masculinity, killed people who are homosexual or transgender or whatever, just to prove that they're real men.
Correct.
So, surprisingly, though, Odin doesn't deny it. Instead, he fires back at that Loki once spent 8 years underground as a woman, milking cows, and that they even gave birth, which refers to Loki's shapeshifting into the mare and that whole business. So what you get is two of them hurling ergi accusations at each other across a feast table, which is both darkly funny and genuinely revealing. They're both outside the norms they're weaponizing. Loki really has done all these things, so has Odin, arguably, and yet they're using these accusations as the most devastating social weapons available to them.
Mm-hmm.
This is what makes Ergi's concept so interesting in context. It wasn't quite homophobia in the modern sense, because it wasn't really about just attraction, right? You could be a top, that's cool. It was about passivity, gender transgression. A man who took a dominant role with another man wasn't shamed. It was the receptive partner who bore the stigma, like I was saying earlier. Loki, who had shapeshifted into women, given birth, practiced Seder, really embodies Ergi in almost every possible way. Queer icon. Love that for them. And yet, they're the one wielding it as a weapon against everyone else, which is kind of unfortunate. There's
Mm-hmm.
something almost gleeful and subversive about it. Like they know exactly how hollow the whole value system is, which if that's the case, then it's like, okay, it's more about like you want to judge me? Y'all are doing the same shit.
Exactly.
It's like not that they actually believe in any of this bullshit, but they're like, oh, if I'm a faggot, you're a faggot.
Yeah.
Like, I'm sorry that you're just in the closet. And that's again an interesting parallel because we think about that, like, again, they do all these things to help, and then every time they get screwed over or it gets painted as like, oh, they're just manipulating. And no thanks are given, but then people could just throw a dinner party and it's like they get all the praise in the world and it's petty, but yes, but like right. So the gods cannot win the argument, right? That's the remarkable thing. One by one, they step up, and one by one, Loki dismantles them with their own histories, their own secrets, things that apparently everyone in the hall already knew, but they had decency not to say. The thing is, Loki is never accused of making things up, or at least the poem doesn't treat it that way. They are just saying the quiet parts out loud. The only god they speak to respectfully is Heimdall, though even that exchange has a barb in it. And that when Sif, Thor's wife, tries to make peace by offering Loki mead and saying at least she had been faithful, Loki loved this moment. Tells her, the fuck you have, Keisha? Loki is like, the fuck you have? And tells her she hasn't. And they've slept with her too. Like, what you talking about, girl? Who you? What? Thor, I banged your wife. So, which is a bold choice because by this
Very
point,
bold choice.
ends it. It's not a better argument. It's Thor walking up in with Mjolnir because Thor's not going to
Yeah.
argue, I guess. Normally I think that's annoying, but honestly, rock on.
Deserved.
At least at least
Yeah.
it ended the argument at this point.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want the story moral being like as long as you hit something really hard, people shut up. But anyway, it's a telling end, though. The gods can't beat Loki with words because they are right. Loki is right, or at least right enough. They can only beat Loki, representing truth, with force. And even as they walk out the door, Loki is still winning the argument.
I don't know. I don't know. I'm gonna come at you devil's advocate style here. Even if even if you know they're wrong, if they are being loud and obnoxious and trying to spread rumors about you, is it best to just continue to shut them down, like continue to like no 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 no, and they just get louder and more outrageous with their claims, or is it best to just let them talk?
And I agree. I'm not saying violence was ever the answer here. The point is that when they try to like argue,
Mm-hmm.
it's like the idea that Loki is always like the god of mischief and trickery, which implies lying. And it's like, apparently not every no,
and
and I don't
that's
love that.
yeah.
But like, and it's like the idea of that, like when the truth sometimes comes out, like the real lesson would be, we hear you, you're right. We need to treat you better. We need to think about what we're doing wrong, right?
Mm-hmm.
But no, they just double down until to the point where, like, because they can't win an argument, they just go to violence. And arguably, this all leads to Ragnarok, the
Mm-hmm.
war, the end of the world. And it's like almost implying, like, if you just admitted Like, if you were willing to listen and actually talk it out, properly talk it out, right? Then maybe a lot of this shit could have, like, a lot of things can be avoided. War, the end of the world, I guess. Like, a
Mm-hmm.
lot of it could have been avoided, but they don't want to or know how.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so they can only, it's not, and even then, like, it's not really beating truth. Truth eventually comes out. Truth
Correct.
eventually has, because truth, you can't undo it. You can't bottle it back up, right? You can pretend it wasn't said, but that's about it.
Mm-hmm.
So, and it's complicated too, because of Freyja, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't want any of that to be true, but it could also just be like this idea that, yeah, she had agency and maybe she did sleep with everyone in the room. Again, rock on, right?
Yeah.
Like, rock on,
It could be an
right?
agency
But,
thing,
like,
it could be slander. And because of the
but,
way that it's stated, we don't know.
and the thing is like, we'll assume truth, right? And we're not going to shame her for it. We love that for her, right? That it's more for Loki's perspective that they're like, look, how come I have partners in these relationships and I get shamed, but they can sleep with everyone in the fucking room, including their brother, and it's fine. Facts. I mean, like, why?
Mm-hmm.
Why is that a problem? Like, if it's good enough for her, why is it not for me? And then the fart thing probably at the end was just to be a dick. But, like, I mean, maybe that happened, but the point was, is like, it's just like, again, did did it to dismantle her image as this proud, powerful woman. But, like, even she is a submissive from time to time, and that's literally her essence. Like, that's the other part of it,
Mm-hmm.
right? That's part of the femininity of it all, according to your culture,
Mm-hmm.
right? But again, fine for her, not fine for me.
Yeah.
So it's just something to think about. Um, and so, like, this isn't necessarily a story about, like, with her as a central figure at this point, but she is there, right? And
She's
it's
present
like
and
her
getting insulted.
sexuality, yes, but also, like, her sexuality is a big part of this discussion. And Seder, which what she represents, is a main theme here, and like what that represents. So it's just something we gotta come to terms with, and I think it's an important discussion to have, right?
Mm-hmm.
So Loki doesn't stay free too terribly long after this. Their punishment, when it eventually comes, is horrific. But in this one night in Ager's Hall, armed with nothing but the truth, supposedly, as a weapon, Loki makes the whole divine order look small. And so Freya's part in the story is small, but like we've discussed already before, it has a lot of good talking points. Um, it brings out the values and customs found in this culture that we've been diving into: masculinity, femininity, sexuality, gender roles. What does that all mean?
Mm-hmm.
And also in many Western culture, including English and American cultures, which we are descendants of, both
Mm-hmm.
through the Anglo-Saxons of it all, the Romans of it all, and then of course the Vikings of it, of it all, Danelaw, right?
Yep.
These cultures inject themselves, and then the Normans, who are both Norse and Frankish, which were Germanic, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, all of these, right, we are descendants of, and we can see a vein, culturally anyway, and we can see a vein of a lot of this today. So it's a great look at where a lot of these concepts and like come from.
Yeah. But getting back to Freya herself, it's time to discuss the end. As in the end. Ragnarok.
Mm-hmm.
It is one of the most surprising and frustrating mysteries in Norse mythology that we don't actually know exactly what happens to Freya during Ragnarok. For a goddess so incredibly powerful and central to the Norse pantheon, her fate during the twilight of the gods is left completely unwritten in the surviving source materials like the Poetic Edda and Snorri Sturluson's Prose Edda. However, looking at the context of Ragnarok and what happens to the people closest to her, we can piece together a pretty good picture of where she is and what might have happened. While Freyja's fate is a blank page, her twin brother Freyr, his fate is a major set piece of the apocalypse. Freyr goes into battle against the fire giant Surtur because Freyr had previously given away his magic, self-fighting sword to win the hand of the goddess Grettir. He is forced to fight Surtur with nothing but an antler. He fights bravely, but is ultimately killed by the fire giant.
I mean, that was a choice. I feel like of all the things he could have grabbed.
Yeah.
So,
a fucking antler.
Like, guy.
My dude. That's
like,
wild.
A sword maybe would have been more helpful. I don't know.
Correct.
Maybe a bucket of water. A bucket of water. I don't know.
But given how close the twins were, this would have been a devastating blow for Freyja. Surtur's flames then go on to engulf the entire world, burning Yggdrasil and destroying nearly everything. So, many mythological scholars actually lean towards the theory that Freyja survives Ragnarok. This theory is largely based on the fate of her father Njord. In the poem Vafthrudnismal, Odin plays a deadly game of trivia with a wise giant and asks what will happen to Njord. The giant reveals that while Njord was sent to the Aesir as a hostage at the end of the world, Ragnarok, he will return home to the wise Vanir. Because Njord survives and goes back to Vanaheim, many historians believe it makes sense that Freyja, and perhaps the other Vanir gods who weren't on the front lines of the Aesir's doom, survived and returned home with him. The Vanir were deeply tied to the earth, nature, and the cycle of rebirth, which aligns perfectly with the fact that the world is reborn green and fertile after Ragnarok's destruction. But what about her army? Remember that Freyja has the first pick of the slain warriors, taking half of them to her field, Folkvangar, which Odin takes the other half to Valhalla. During Ragnarok, Odin's warriors, the Einarjar, marched out of Valhalla's gates to fight the forces of chaos along with the Aesir. But the texts are entirely silent on what Freyja's army does. Do they march out to fight alongside Odin's men? Do they stay behind to defend Folkvangar? Or do they act as a reserve force for the new world? The texts just don't say. But why would the original storytellers leave out the fate of such a major goddess? There are a couple of likely reasons. The easiest explanation is simply that there are lost texts. Many of the Germanic and later Norse myths were oral traditions for centuries before being written down. It is likely there was a story about Freyja at Ragnarok, but the poem detailing it was simply lost to time. Another reason could be the focus being more on the Aesir. The surviving accounts of Ragnarok are heavily focused on the patriarchal warrior-centric Aesir gods, Odin, Thor, Tyr, and Heimdall, and their mutual destruction with their greatest enemies. Freyja, as a Vanir goddess of magic, love, and fertility, may not fit into the specific blood-soaked poetic narrative that the skalds were trying to weave about the end of the world. So while we don't get a cinematic final stand for Freyja, the breadcrumbs left in the mythology suggest that the Lady of the Vanir might have outlived the apocalypse to see the world begin anew. On our journey today, we have delved into all of the different stories depicting Freyja, and in doing so, we've done a lot, not only to flesh out her character, but that of the people that worshipped her. Though we can see her values and perhaps even glimpse a distant past that was never written down and forgotten. But unlike many other European depictions of goddesses like her, Freyja is depicted not only as powerful but benevolent, and having a level of autonomy and respect unheard of in many cultures before and after hers. And if she really is Golvik, then there is perhaps an irony that she was burned for her use of magic, accused of being a greedy witch, and that transformed her into something far greater. It's the story that unfortunately did not happen historically for women who were burned in the real world for similar transgressions, real or otherwise. Hers is a story of hope, even if we don't know what happened to her at the end. We'd like to think that she survived and helped usher in that beautiful new world. After all, she had survived death at least 3 times already. So what's one more time, right?
If you like what you heard today, please give us a positive review on whatever platform you listen to this podcast on. It goes a long way for us to appease the algorithm gods and get this suggested to others just like you. The more we can connect with our fellow history nerds, the more we can build up a community and keep this show going.
Also, we have a Patreon where you can hang out with us and get exclusive content, like videos where we might try to make ancient recipes, talk about topics that couldn't fit into the main arcs of the podcast, and just generally being batshit and dumpster fires, all for the price of a latte per month. Research materials and books cost a lot of money, and it takes a lot of time to create this show, so anything that you can provide would be a huge help.
We can't wait to see you again next week, and as always, thank you for listening. Bye for now.
Bye, guys.